In this episode, we are going to be talking about fight or flight. And you get to see this gnarly black eye that I got. Hi, I am Kai Van Leuven. I spent over 30 years in the Mormon Church, and this is what I did after leaving.
And I'm Di Beals. I'm a pastor at Venture Church in Mill Creek, Washington, and I'm your friend. And as always, I'm along for the journey.
All right. So in this episode, we talk about this fight or flight mentality that I had when I first left the church and how I changed maybe that mentality through this journey. So I have always been, a fighter. I've always had that fight mentality, not really as a little kid, but in my teen years and throughout my 20s, I was a fighter. This is a black eye that I got, and it was a pretty decent one while I was in a wrestling practice training with someone. Let me just give some context to this.
Yeah, because I was wondering if you got in a fight on an airplane, according to that graphic, during COVID, because you had a mask.
Yeah, I know. I tried to block off the mask. I didn't want it to be locked in time. Let's just put it in perspective. My front 4 teeth, the very front 4, are all fake.
Whoa.
Okay? Yeah, I've taken some shots to the face.
Good work, Mr. Dentist.
Yeah, well, not so good. I'm gonna get veneers here in a couple years, but we'll talk about that later. When it comes to competing, investing, or literally fighting, I'm a very physical person who's never really backed down from a challenge. I have had at least 5 concussions. I mean, we talk about CTE in the NFL or whatever you want to talk about. 5 that I can remember. And so,
That's a funny statement right there.
Yeah, I guess you shouldn't make concussion jokes, but there you go. And being a fighter and fighting has always been kind of a part of my identity, at least as an adult. Flight just wasn't an option. If I found myself in a really tight situation, there are investments I made that went terribly wrong. There are situations I found myself that went awful. I just had to fight. That was just my mentality. After leaving the church, you start to evaluate how you handle situations. Like you said, hey, I've been fighting my whole life. Maybe this other option of flight might be a better option for me. And so I started to think about that, and maybe it was just dealing with all of the stuff that comes and some of the pain that comes from leaving that made me not want to fight anymore. But I remember spending a few years in this avoiding, time of my life. And I want to set this to the backdrop of this ridiculous story that will paint how crazy wrestlers are. Okay. Well, I want to set it up with this one thing, and this is how to disappear. I remember slipping into the incognito app on Google and researching this topic of how to disappear, the art of disappearing, really the pinnacle of flight, right?
Yep.
The pinnacle of getting away. And I remember like looking over all these steps of how to do, how to totally eliminate your identity and just go and live a different life. And that had never crossed my mind until after the faith crisis, that you could actually just totally disappear. And I looked at what it took, and it's literally like, don't ever contact anyone from your past life. Don't ever, and you can do it, but it's a really lonely and hard road.
Yeah.
But I remember researching it as like, is this an option? Is this a viable option? Maybe an extreme option. So I want to talk about this crazy story of the Hawkeye Tattoo. There was a wrestler by the name of Chad Zapitol. Okay, Chad Zapitol. He was a wrestler who, I'm not going to talk a lot about wrestling for those of you who are going to tune out, but he had made it to the NCAA finals. So think of like March Madness basketball. He had made it to the final game 3 years in a row, the final match to win a national title.
Okay.
After his sophomore year, he gets this happy little Hawkeye, right? This, if you're watching, like a cartoon Hawkeye, he gets it on his thigh after losing the national championship as a sophomore
Okay.
in college. The next year, as a junior, loses the national championship.
Shoot.
Okay? Loses it again, second place, 2 years in a row. Gets another tattoo on his chest.
Same one?
Of a Hawkeye with the talons out, ready to fight. Okay, so that's his.
So it's getting a little more fierce.
It's getting a little more fierce. The coping mechanism is heightening itself. Okay. Senior year, last chance. Okay. Loses the national championship.
Aww.
Okay. Third year in a row. And he gets a tattoo next to this eagle with the talon, or with the hawk with his talons out. He gets a tattoo with that hawk ripping his heart out.
Oh.
Literally, that's what is drawn on him by a tattoo artist. That hawk ripping his heart out and blood tattooed all over his torso.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really defining his entire life by his college experience.
Yeah.
Bad.
Yeah, it is too bad. And you think about this, like I think about how tied in I was to the Mormon Church and how bad it hurt for me to leave, right? Just hurt really, really bad. And I kind of have this, when I heard that story, it kind of made me relate to his experience. After each loss, he's trying to cope with it. And we can say he's coping with it in a very permanent, non-healthy way, but he's coping with this loss. And he does one final thing in this loss that I think is telling. He decides to move. This guy who grew up in Iowa, who was an Iowa kid, decides to leave it all and move to California. His coach, Dan Gable, if you're a big wrestling guy, that name means something to you. His coach, Dan Gable, met up with him decades later and said, "Why did you move to California? What was the driving force behind this California move?" And he said, "I went to California to hide."
Whoa.
Yeah. Again, another way to cope with this loss of something that was so important to him.
Yeah. That's flight. That is flight for sure. Yes.
That is flight. That is cope with the fight and the struggle, and then
run.
And then run. And I
So
think
that was did you feel that way? So you said that you researched how to disappear, and maybe that's too extreme, but did you still feel like you needed to go somewhere else?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I felt that I mean, I've always been a workaholic. I don't wear that as a badge of honor. That's just a fact of who I am. And I stopped working. I have felt no desire to work anymore, and not even a driving force to do that. We talked about us traveling in an RV. You can look at the past episodes of that. But that was part of this coping was, what do I do now? And I feel and really it's not a physical thing. Being in a different location, if you are dealing with problems and stress and what cognitive dissonance
Mhm.
and being, overwhelmed by your emotions. I'm going to cut to the chase on this episode. It doesn't help if you live in an RV, or if you travel
Yeah.
all the time,
Yeah.
or if you start drinking, or if you start smoking pot, or if it all those feelings don't really go away, or if you do mushrooms, all those feelings don't just disappear,
Yeah.
right?
Well, there's an old saying, "Everywhere I go, there I am." You can't
Yeah,
run from yourself goes with you.
exactly. All these times where I was trying to cope with the loss of my faith, I had a crazy person with me. I had somebody who wasn't thinking right, and that was myself, right?
Mm,
And it didn't matter. It didn't matter where I went. I still had that. Well, let's talk about that.
yeah.
We did the RV. This is actually a picture of my little RV. It's a cute,
Oh,
yeah, it's a cute little thing. It's not the exact one, but it's one that I found of my exact model. Um, we drove all over the Western United States, went everywhere in it. And I think there are these momentary times where you're not thinking about, you know, uh, the loss of your faith, and those are good times, and those
mhm.
can also be healing, but it's also avoiding. We spent well over 100 days 1 year in an RV, just trying to, have me kind of deal with the problems and the stressors.
Can I
Um,
ask a question? And maybe you're
yeah.
already gonna go here, but so I'm trying to understand the why, which I think is what's gonna really relate you to the rest of our audience. So there's a why as far as the fight or flight. Is there also a why related to I don't want to see things that remind me, I don't want to see people or places that remind me? So that kind of physical part of it. And then is there also a grieving part of it? Like I have to go away. I can't grieve while I'm here being faced with this. I got to go somewhere and process the grief.
I think it's more about avoidance, really,
Okay. All right.
of
So there's
life.
nothing healthy in this. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that there was just avoiding, just saying, "Hey, I wanna just not really deal with this." Like, it is so this is what I'll say, and this is obviously a bunny trail here, but I believe that dealing with a loss of your faith is really about capacity. And do you have the capacity to deal with your problems? And really fresh out of the church, I really didn't have that
Mm,
capacity, and I wasn't really trying to grow in that capacity of dealing with my problems. I
mm.
was literally just trying to avoid dealing with anything that was stressful at all. Um, and so I think that that's important to
Yeah.
say. It wasn't necessarily, "Oh, I drive by a church building every day and that makes me upset." It was more like, how can I just avoid responsibility
Yeah, I gotta get
altogether?
out of here. I gotta get out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, this is the other thing. We also decided to cruise a lot. And
Okay.
so we went on 4 cruises in 1 year, and these were not 3-day cruises. We cruised for about 50 days in a year.
Oh,
We were
wow.
Yeah, we were cruisers. And
Whew.
so another way for me, I mean, if you wanna be entertained, a cruise ship is very entertaining. Um, and you don't wanna address things.
Right.
That's
It's
the
a
way to
huge
do it.
distraction so that you don't have to face things.
Exactly. And so that was another form of my flight, was, how can I just avoid reality? How can I avoid being in this situation? Um, we were on a cruise ship, and we touched down in Costa Rica. We were on the Pacific side of Costa Rica after going through the Panama Canal. So a lot of people have done that cruise. And we're on the Pacific side. We stopped there, and we just had the most amazing day. Like, it's one day, right? It's a cruise ship. You touch down, you pull back up. Um, and I turned to my wife and I said, "This is it. This is where we're going. We're moving to Costa Rica."
Wow.
And we start, we get back on the ship and it's,
Hold on. What was her reaction? I need to know.
her reaction was like, maybe, I don't
Okay.
know. I mean,
She tempered you a little.
yeah, she was like, I don't know, maybe. I mean, we started looking at real estate together and, doing that whole thing.
Oh, she's such a good woman. She let you just sort of process your way through that.
Well, she put her spin on it. So we're
Okay,
we're
okay.
talking about Costa Rica, and like that would have been, I don't know about the ultimate flight, maybe somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa would have been the ultimate flight. But it would have been, a way for us to kind of disappear and do
Yeah.
something different. And so we kind of wrestled with that idea. We went home and thought about it. And my wife is pretty smart about this stuff. She says, "Well, I want to be in the United States. How about we move to Hawaii?"
Mm.
And I said, "Listen, polygamy would have had to have gone the opposite way. You'd have to have about 5 husbands to be able to afford moving to Hawaii." Sorry. Hey, this is a ex-Mormon podcast. But it's expensive. There's a lot going on and it's just not very doable. I have no work over here,
Mhm.
but she kind of threw that out there as, well, maybe this is a good option for us. And so we thought about it and thought about it. And I just, this Hawaii thing is a totally new thing. I'll pick up where I was in the story. So I had gone from faith crisis. I had been saved, which I honestly think that part of me being saved was part of me saying, I actually want to deal with my problem.
Mhm. Mhm.
I actually want to I don't just want to do this on my own. I don't just want to avoid. I want to
Yeah.
actually
Face it.
face it and try to get some tools and try to have Jesus help heal me, which is kind
Mhm.
of what I was wrestling with. Like, do I actually want anyone to help me heal in this
Mhm.
process? Or do I want it to be me? And do I want
'Cause
the
you can
pride?
make that choice. You can just run and never deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
And
think I
people
could have
do.
continued on that. I think I probably would have maybe amplified my coping um to whatever else that means,
Mhm.
that could have turned into some type of substance, something else. I don't know how that would have manifested itself. But I think that was me reaching out and saying, I can't actually do this on my own. I don't feel good about the direction that this is going. And at the same time, my wife and I felt that doing something different with our lives was also an important step in this. And so we ended up um I bought a house in Hawaii as part of this process, as part of this and not really knowing where we're going. I will say this, and this sounds kind of wild. I had never been to Kauai before buying my house here. Never stepped foot on this island. I just read about it. And I'll tell you, this is what it looked like when we first showed up here. Are you ready, Di?
I'm
You ready
ready.
for this one? This
Oh,
is
yeah.
where I slept in my Hawaiian basement.
Mm.
Um, this is a little pad that was on the ground, and then a huge cockroach, which I had never really seen cockroaches that big.
Mm.
Um, but that's the same floor, and that's how messy and nasty the floor looked when I got here the first night. As I slept on the floor, I didn't have blankets, I didn't have anything. I literally just slept on the floor. Um, so that, and this is really part of my journey.
Mhm.
I'm going to go into the real estate guru, how to save you hundreds of thousands of dollars. You do not have to do that.
Mhm.
I'm just, for all the ex Mormons out there, you might be believing, you might be non believing, wherever you fall on that spectrum, you don't have to go through these wild extremes of avoidance. which is really what I would call a lot of these. I felt like God wanted me to do this Hawaii thing. Hey, nice place to be called. Come on, let's go. But at the same time, I look at it and I say, I'd spent the last few years also traveling and kind of on the run a little bit. And so I think that God knew that this would be something that I would take on. And so what I want to say is, you don't have to spend all that time and all that effort and all that mental space trying to avoid your problems, trying to run from your problems and be in this flight mode.
And
You
yet
can,
it's
yeah,
such a
go ahead.
human natural response. It is a natural, well, at least temptation. But I want to know, what have you learned from it? Maybe you're getting there, but
Yeah, I think I wanted to get there, but I appreciate the segue. What happened? Let me set it up this way, Di. I had never lived on my own ever. At 35 years old, I had gone from growing up in a great home to going straight to the mission,
mhm,
coming home 2 weeks later, getting married,
mhm,
being in a married, committed relationship. And I never really been like on my own for any more than, let's say, like a week. At 35 years old, I'd never really, been on my own.
mhm,
I hadn't gone, shopping for myself since the mission. I mean, like grocery shopping or doing laundry, or I'm a very social person, having no one in the home.
mhm,
And when I first got here, I was not expecting it to be a healing experience. I was just like, okay, I thought it was gonna be terrifying, doing all these things that I hadn't done laundry in, 15 years or whatever. Um, oh no.
shout
Now
out
people are,
Allison.
shout out Allison. Shout out, people are gonna say, what a misogynist pig. I don't know.
Oh,
So
no.
okay,
She
so
does it lovingly.
she does it. Yeah, exactly. Um, but my thought in this was that it was taking a huge step out that I had never really experienced, by myself, living by myself for an extended period of time. And you find yourself sitting at a beach, or sitting, at the top of a mountain like Waimea Canyon out here in Kauai. You find yourself sitting there and really thinking about life and the trajectory that you want your life to have.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
I
good.
was working 12, 14 hours a day, but in those breaks, I turned off all the noise. You turn off I didn't have TV. Well, I'll tell you what I didn't have. I didn't have TV. I didn't have internet. I didn't have
Running
running
water,
water. Yep.
electricity.
Electricity. Didn't have a shower. I had one working light.
Mm,
Um, I was running my whole project off of an extension cord. So, it's really minimalist. And you don't just get into the same routines that maybe you have anywhere else. And it was a really good break for me to work mentally through a lot of the problems that I had.
mhm.
Um, Started reading the Bible was a book I had. I bought one at Walmart, $10. Come on. I bought a Bible. I brought one over with me, but I bought one as well. And just to be able to like have have a lot of distractions in a healthy way
Mhm,
away from me, and to really want to fight to work on myself.
mhm.
Um and I think that that's a really important thing for a lot of people to not just avoid, not just pick up an intense hobby or something like that, but to actually like work through these problems. This podcast has been the same way for me. Like, we sit across from each other and we talk about my problems that I had. The Michael Wilder thing, me talking about a really traumatic thing that happened to me in my late teens,
Mhm.
has helped me to heal. And this is where I want to say, this is where the money savings is. You don't have to buy a house in Hawaii. Okay. Really, what you need, I think people need the Lord. I think that they need
Yeah.
Jesus in their lives. to
Mhm.
help them heal, not just for salvation, but for a healing mechanism. I think that they need trusted people that they can talk to. That can be a
Yep.
therapist,
Yep.
a counselor, um, someone who's going to lead you in a positive way to deal with your problems and not just run.
And there's something in there that you said. So you're working physical labor, like demanding physical labor, 12 to 14 hours a day, and then you're outside on your breaks, processing, thinking, maybe you're praying, you're reading your Bible. I mean, the average person probably can't set aside that much time, but the valuable part of that is being away from the distractions that keep you from thinking is a big piece of what I hear, plus some sort of physical activity. And so we're not creating anything dogmatic here. There's not like, well, you must exercise. But there is something about like this is why I love to go. I hike many, many, many miles. And it's because my job is very demanding of my time, demanding of my attention, demanding of my emotional resources. And for me to go hike somewhere, it's not about how tall the mountain is or how strenuous it is, although I do like those. It's about being out of the cell phone grid and having my phone not be buzzing constantly and just having time as I'm walking. And I rarely go alone. I'm with someone else. We don't talk the whole time. And so just being able to think through things while I'm breathing fresh air and taking deep breaths and stretching my legs and pushing myself. There's something I feel connected to, not only grounded in myself, but that's how I feel connected to God, being out in creation. And I think it's really healthy, that messaging of putting aside the distractions and facing what you have to process through or think through or talk through is really, it's just, you can't get around it. It's so healthy.
Yeah, and I guess I'm gonna push back on it a little bit
Okay.
in the
Do.
sense of what about capacity?
Yep.
Like, what about when you first come out of something? I wonder how much capacity I had to deal with that problem.
Sure, sure.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, and I think grief comes into play there. So if you put it in, usually we think grief is, the death of someone we love. And you can't just lose someone you love. And then the next day you're going to go hiking or work 12 hours on a house unless you are fully avoiding. And so I think that's part of that process too, is as you're working through grief, because grief isn't loss of a loved one, it's loss. So grief comes because of loss. So everyone's process through grief is different, but eventually there will come the point where we have to face it. I mean, that's what this whole episode is about. And how will we face it? How will we build the capacity to face it?
yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's that's really what I wanted to get out of this is that I have this saying when I remodel a home. It's not that the work is hard. It's that figuring out what you're doing is really hard. Like figuring out the plan, figuring out the steps, right? Is really challenging. It's like building a business. The things that actually make you money or make you successful in a business, if somebody put those right in front of you, you could do them in like a couple of weeks or a
Right.
month.
Right.
But you spend all of this time wandering through and trying to figure out exactly what to do. And I think that if there is some advice that I can give someone who is wandering, right? Who is like, well, where do I go with this? And how do
Yeah.
I handle my family? And how do I handle like what's going to happen to me after this life? And how do I handle this, all of these internal struggles that
Yeah.
we have. I'll say the best thing that I've done in this journey is find some trusted people that I think and find some systems that can really help you and bless you in your life, whatever those systems are. Like, I believe that that's a relationship with Jesus. I'm
Mhm.
unapologetic about that,
Yeah.
that is something that can help you. There's people that can help you in your life. I am a big diet. This will be an interesting discussion we can have. I am maybe not humble enough for counseling. I
Mhm.
wish that I was. I wish that I had just that shred of humility to do that. But I'm pro counseling if that works for people. If that is something that you can do. I know that counseling can be seen, at least from my lens and my background, can be seen with a little bit of skepticism.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on somebody going and seeing a counselor to help process through some of these problems?
I mean, I think you just said it, and I'm just gonna underline what you said. You have to find what works for you, and that might not be the thing that works for someone, or it may not be the thing that works right now. I think bigger than a counselor is someone to talk to, and having someone to talk to is really important, and we have to use wisdom in who we choose to talk to. So if we choose to talk to somebody about a topic that we're angry about and so are they, we're just going to amplify anger. And is that what we want? So finding someone to talk to that is, I don't know, quote unquote neutral or safe or wise or tempered, whatever that is. But I think some people a therapist or a counselor is absolutely the right thing, but that doesn't have to work for everybody.
Yeah, and I was hoping that you would not have any reservations about that. I know that I've heard mixed things from churches if counseling is good, which is an interesting discussion to have. But talking to someone is always good, right?
Right.
Bottling
Yeah.
it up and running.
You're referencing maybe a small faction of church systems or religious systems that are going to say, well, if you have enough faith, you don't need help. And I just think that is baloney. That's garbage.
There you
How's
go.
that? How's
So
that for me having a very stated opinion?
okay, good. Yeah, and I was hoping that you would say that. Also, in the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, for those of you out there.
Well done getting
Um,
that in there.
yeah. There's also this idea that it needs to come through a bishop, that a
Mm,
bishop needs to be your counseling source, or that it needs to come through the church's lens of counselors. So the church might have church provided that are going to lead you down a church path.
mm,
Now I have a question for you, Di. Is it
mhm.
is that what you would recommend? Would you say, "Hey, we're kind of the gatekeepers of this." Gosh, I'm giving you such a softball
I
question.
know you are.
Um,
I'm shaking my head no for anyone that's not watching on video. My neck hurts from shaking my head
okay,
no so much.
so you are not the gatekeeper
No.
of this. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Like what is it that does it have to come through you? Are you the person that's saying, gosh, I hate even saying this. It's so loaded. This is all about me and I need to protect me. So let's make sure that even your counseling goes through you. It goes through the church. Sorry.
I can't even take it seriously.
Yeah.
I always like to look for let's if I give the benefit of the doubt to people, which I try to do. I try and look for where was the kernel of truth in here that this got built from.
Mm,
So if I do that and I say there's a kernel of truth in that, like I just said, you have to be careful where you go for advice. So if I know somebody who's really struggling and they don't want to talk to me because they don't want a faith response, because I'm certainly going to include a faith response, uh, but they go to somebody who is completely anti-faith, they're going to get a completely anti-faith response, to which I would probably encourage, hey, let's not go to somebody who's going to bash whatever faith you're holding on to. So, I mean, am I the gatekeeper? No, but I want someone to seek in healthy areas, healthy feedback and counsel. And there are places that are not healthy. So Maybe that's the way I would say it is. There's some places we should avoid getting counsel. For example, if you are, struggling with a substance abuse problem and you're trying to leave substance abuse, you're not going to go to someone who is fully immersed in substance abuse and ask them for help. That would not be wise. So that's my example.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's all good and wise counsel. Like I think that's all kind of where I wanted this discussion to go, that people really need to talk and really need to process these emotions. Like that's a huge driving force for Jesus for Mormons, is
Yeah.
just having a voice out there that is pro belief, and that is, a voice of somebody who came through a pretty gnarly faith crisis. And so this is where I will leave this episode.
Oh, wait, you can't leave it yet. I have to ask a question.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh boy. This is not a softball, but it's a
Oh,
legitimate
good.
question. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just am curious. So you've talked in the last few minutes about wanting to run to Costa Rica. Your family decided maybe that wasn't the best thing for them. And so you've landed on Hawaii. That was really therapeutic for you to spend all the months working on your house. Now you've moved your family there. How do you feel about being there now? Do you still think, oh, this was originally aversion or diversion and now it's healthy? Or where does that live in you now?
That is not a softball answer
I
question.
know. I know. I told you it wasn't. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you're in process.
No, I just talked with my wife about this last night, and
Oh.
I said, I really wish we wouldn't have rushed
Mm.
into this. Um, mm,
So it's still in process. You don't have to give more than that. I wasn't trying to put you
I
on the spot.
well, I can answer it because I think it's insightful. I mean, this is
Yeah.
what's happening in real time.
Yeah. People are learning from your journey too. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm not going to use the regret term, but I'm also not going to say I feel 100% great about it.
Mm.
Um, there's just a lot of, I mean, you leave everything that
Yeah.
and I'm talking about simple things. I'm talking about getting rid of everything in your home and putting that into 12 boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, not seeing people on, that you grew up seeing. Me and my family got together every single Sunday. Not having that, there's just a lot of things that you actually leave that when you're kind of flying back and forth, you're like, it's not permanent. And when you're here and
Yeah.
you realize that you're not just flying back home to be in an environment that's comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I don't want to say regret, but I do want to say it's a lot different, and there's a lot more challenges. There's, who am I going to be friends with?
Mm-hmm.
What is this going to look like for my kids? There's a lot more coin flips that come into it. I still feel like we're supposed to be here, like in a very God way, that this is where we're supposed to be, but it's a lot harder than I anticipated it being with this transition.
Mm.
Um,
It's a good answer. Thanks for your honesty.
Yeah. When you started to get into it, I said, "Oh, I don't want to answer this question, but I will." Hey, we'll go with it. This is my encouragement to people. Reaching out for help is a way to fight.
Yeah.
And
Good.
I think that the fighter mentality, if that's not in you, might be a good thing for all you ex-Mormons out there. Wanting to deal with your problems, face them head on, answer some of those questions, and maybe and get some help along that process, and be a fighter. Take action, be a fighter, and do that. And I know that that's really where the healing comes from,
Mm-hmm.
is like by actually taking the steps to deal with those problems and to be a fighter. And
It
so
builds resiliency in you. I think I think sometimes we think fighting is all about punching, but sometimes fighting is just you're still standing at the end of the fight. I mean, you can take punches, you can give punches, but you're resilient. And I think that's important too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And even if you felt like you were resilient and this really knocked you down, well,
Yeah.
stay with this fighting thing.
Right. Get up.
Um,
Get up,
get up.
Rock. Get up,
Yeah.
Rock.
Get up and don't just run out of the stadium.
Right.
Right. Um, there you go.
We
Really,
really nailed the fighting illustration.
yeah. Get in there and just like try to deal with it piece by piece and try to really think about your problems. Seek help, seek trusted people who can build you up, who can give you some positive. That's maybe I am so grateful that I had those people around me.
Mhm.
And if you don't, try to find a good group that can really be there for you and be positive and be supportive.
Yeah.
All right, Di. You
Good
think
stuff.
we've done this one
Good
justice
stuff.
today?
Yep. I
All
want to
right.
go box right now.
Oh, there you. Di's actually pretty tough. She has some muscles on her. I was like, Di's pretty lean. I asked her one time, I was like, Di, you're buff. And I was kind of messing around with her and she flexed. And I was like, oh, wait, she actually really does have like, she's actually like really strong.
I am a
Um,
certified strong first Russian style kettlebell instructor. Yes.
There we go. So until next time,
Yeah.
fight.
Send us
Yeah.
your questions at jesusformormons@gmail.com. Questions, comments, thoughts, feedback. If you definitely, if you have some experience or questions about this particular topic of talking or asking for help, we are happy to hear those and to encourage you. And leave comments here on the podcast or on YouTube. It helps us, and like and subscribe helps us get the word out. Share it with a friend, share it with an enemy.
There you go. And I'm not big on like the algorithm, but it does help. So the more subscribers we have, the more whatever. I mean, if that's something that you can do to help us out, that's great, and we would really appreciate
Thank you very
it.
much. Yep.
Yeah. So
Okay.
until next
Till the
time.
next tough topic.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Love you guys.